If you've ever worked in the service industry, you'll know the mantra. The customer is always right.
This job would be great if it wasn't for the f***ing customers.
Businesses drill this into their staff, and it's not out of kindness, but because keeping regular customers happy is far easier and way more profitable than hunting for new ones.
Let me guess, Tiny, a small salad?
It's basic survival. Respect your audience, and they'll keep coming back.
Ma'am, you're absolutely right, and I apologize.
So why then do Western gaming studios seem so determined to do the exact opposite? Instead of listening to their players, we see senior developers mocking them on social media, CEOs passing the blame for failures onto fans, and a growing hostility towards the very people buying their games. It's almost as if the industry seems it can survive without us.
This is fine.
Later in this video, we'll dive into why that's happening. But first, let's rewind to a time when studios and players weren't at odds. A time when gaming felt like a partnership, not a battle. Gaming has become a behemoth in the entertainment industry, far outperforming music and movies. Gaming's reach is far more accessible and convenient for people today, thanks to the variety of platforms it's available on, making it a mainstream form of entertainment. But of course, it wasn't always this way. Back in the 80s and 90s, gaming faced an uphill struggle. Technology was far inferior to what we have today, and the tools, assets, and educational resources needed by aspiring game developers were sparse and difficult to access at the very best. Yet despite all these challenges, small studios made up of passionate developers managed to create iconic games that laid the foundation of the gaming industry as we know it today. These studios didn't have bloated budgets or advanced tools. They had creativity, determination, and a clear goal: to make games that would delight and captivate their target audience. And these developers weren't afraid to challenge conventions or push boundaries. They created characters and stories that shocked and offended onlookers outside of the gaming sphere, sparking moral panics and headlines blaming video games for everything from violence to delinquency. Of course, none of this was ever backed by any real evidence, but controversy only fueled gaming's exponential growth, because developers weren't trying to please the critics, they were laser focused on their fans. And the results speak for themselves. Even when a game misfired, these studios often listened to fan grievances and adjusted course. Take Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link. A game originally on the NES, it strayed into RPG-like mechanics and side-scrolling combat, which left many fans longing for the simpler, exploration-driven gameplay of the original. Nintendo course-corrected with Zelda 3: A Link to the Past on the Super Nintendo, creating one of the most beloved entries in the entire series. Developers in this era didn't have the luxury of day one patches to fix their mistakes. If a game was bad, it stayed bad forever. The stakes were way higher, and it forced developers to respect their game's audience's time and money. So if the gaming industry of the 80s and 90s, despite its limited resources, could deliver games and foster communities that are still celebrated today, why are today's AAA studios and gaming media, armed with billions in revenue, still struggling to create the same magic? Instead of learning from their missteps, many studios double down, blaming players for the poor reception. For myself as a gamer, there's three main reasons why the industry is in the state it's in today. Let's start with the first one: corporate greed. But before we get into that, shameless begging for subs.
Please, sir. I want some more.
Now back to the video. Now, as I mentioned at the start of the video, the gaming industry has become so big that it dwarfs all other forms of entertainment media. With so much money on the table, AAA studios now have the backing of investors who previously would have put their money elsewhere. The promise of riches, mostly thanks to live service gaming of course, has drawn floods of investment money into the industry. The primary focus of AAA studios and gaming publications is now no longer to serve the customer, but to please the majority shareholder. And then of course there's the live service gold rush. Many studios who are enticed by the lucrative success of established titles have tried and repeatedly failed to break into the market. The appeal of live service games is obvious. Battle passes, microtransactions, and loot boxes promise ongoing revenue. but there's only so much time and money players can invest. Established giants like Fortnite, League of Legends, and Valorant completely dominate the space, leaving little room for new contenders. Instead of recognizing this oversaturation, studios continue pouring resources into live service projects, often at the expense of the core experiences that made them famous to begin with. But of course, greed alone doesn't explain the full extent of the industry's issues. There's another big factor at play here, one that's become just as divisive and damaging.
So, I'm non-binary.
Political activism has entered the scene and become a major battleground between players and studios. Gaming, of course, has always had room for creative storytelling that challenges societal norms.
Okay.
Just like books and movies and other forms of entertainment media. But there's a huge difference between meaningful inclusion and forcing political agenda down the throats at the expense of player experiences. Western studios have increasingly prioritized ascending the message over creating fun, engaging, or at times even coherent gameplay. Instead of weaving themes organically into their narratives,
I'm non-binary.
many titles shoehorn in political messaging that feels ham-fisted and alienates the very audience that they're trying to engage.
I'm non-binary.
Take recent failures like Concord and the aforementioned Suicide Squad Kills the Justice League and of course Dragon Age the Veilguard, or literally any title tied to Sweet Baby Inc. Players have made it abundantly clear. They are very much rejecting games that force identity politics into their design, and the financial fallout for these studios has been immense. Ultimately, these games and studios are bombing because players don't want to feel like they're sitting through a social studies lecture disguised as entertainment. They want escapism. Fun, engaging experience that takes them out of the grind of everyday life. And this isn't just gamers paying the price. These decisions are failing the studios too. Across the Western gaming industry, mass layoffs are becoming the norm. Entire studios are shutting down as players abandon titles with modern political agendas in favour of games that simply prioritise fun and quality. The message is clear. Players don't want to be lectured, they just want to play and have fun. Instead of listening to what players want, the studios, of course, double down even further, insisting the games are wonderful, and of course, it's the audience that's the problem. It's like watching a chef serve a shit sandwich and then complaining when you don't appreciate it like a fine steak.
Keep on smiling.
Oh, shit! I said over easy!
But if this mix of greed and politics weren't damaging enough, the third and final reason for the industry's downfall might just be the most self-destructive of all. In the early days of gaming, small dedicated teams of developers created some of the most memorable titles in gaming history. These studios worked with tight budgets and small workforces, yet they delivered experiences that gamers cherished. Players looked forward to each new release from their favourite studios, filled with excitement and anticipation. That's a far cry from where major studios are today. As the gaming industry has ballooned into a multi-billion-dollar behemoth, institutional investment has taken centre stage. Decisions about development pipelines, hiring practices, deadlines, and budgets are no longer driven by creativity or passion. Instead, they're dictated by shareholder expectations and corporate agendas. AAA studios have grown into such massive entities so far removed from their players that any meaningful connection has all but disappeared. Gone are the days when AAA studios actively listen to their fans. Today's massive corporations seem unable or unwilling to understand why their fan bases have grown so disillusioned. Players don't look forward to new announcements with excitement anymore. Instead, every trailer and press release is met with skepticism, born from years of broken promises and underwhelming releases.
Hey, just was wondering, is this an out-of-season April Fool's joke?
No.
It's happened so often that players are no longer angry, they're just disappointed. There are countless examples of this disconnect, but it's hard to overlook Blizzard and Ubisoft. 20 years ago, Blizzard was untouchable, delivering masterpieces like Warcraft, Starcraft, Diablo, and of course World of Warcraft. And as far as gamers were concerned, they could do no wrong. Ubisoft carved out its own niche with stealth-driven franchises like Splinter Cell, Ghost Recon, and of course Assassin's Creed. Both studios built loyal followings by consistently delivering quality experiences. But as the years passed and the original developers who made the magic happen left, corporate bloat took over. These studios became filled with people who didn't understand what made their game special. The focus shifted from creating memorable, innovative experiences for players to appeasing major investors. Blizzard and Ubisoft are no longer the studios that they once were, and unless they course correct, they risk losing what remains of their fractured fan bases. So with all that said, it's clear that Western AAA gaming is on a steep decline. But is this a negative for the industry? Surprisingly, no. In fact, it's actually quite the opposite. Many argue that we're living in a golden age for gamers. While Western AAA studios flounder, Eastern developers are thriving. Titles like Black Myth Wukong, Stellar Blade, and Power World have generated massive excitement and showcased the creativity and ambition these studios bring to the table. These developers are hiring more talent, producing high-quality games, and connecting with their audiences in ways that Western studios have largely forgotten. And it's not just the Eastern studios. Western developers like Larian and Grinding Gear Games have seen incredible success with Baldur's Gate 3 and Path of Exile respectively. And why is that? Because they've done what their AAA counterparts refuse to do. They actively listen to the players. By implementing positive changes and avoiding the missteps their players hate, they've built loyalty and excitement. Now compare that to Helldivers 2, for instance, where Arrowhead's failure to respect its audience led to a dramatic drop in player interest. The lesson here for gaming studios could not be clearer. You are a business and your core purpose is to make money. The easiest way to achieve this is by respecting your customers, listening to their feedback, and delivering the experiences that your audience craves. Blaming your players, talking down to them, or being hostile on social media doesn't just alienate your fans, you're digging your own grave. And it's not really that difficult a concept to understand. Gamers are ready to support studios that respect them. The question is, which studios will rise to meet the challenge, and which one will get left in the dust?